Right now in baseball, teams are pushing all their players to the limits of the human body. Players are treated more like science experiments going into the lab rather than normal people who have muscles that can tear and bones that can break under too much stress. Each year we see more and more pitchers go down after throwing harder than ever before, other than Aroldis Chapman, and are being sidelined for a year after only playing half the season. We saw Jacob deGrom on pace to toss the greatest pitching season ever before unfortunately being shut down due to injury. With so many pitchers today having the potential to throw all-time seasons before their arms have given out on them, it has made me want to look at the best pitching seasons we have seen live out to their full potential. The seasons we don't have to think what could have been with, because they left no doubt about their greatness on the field.
Playing baseball was my life.
A pitcher's role on the diamond is pretty simple: prevent the other team from getting across home plate and scoring runs. Stats like FIP, WHIP, and even strikeouts can be good for predicting a pitcher's future performance, but over the course of a large enough sample size, run prevention is what truly dictates a pitcher's value. So with all this said, I think it would be impossible to have a list like this without mentioning the man who did this better than anyone else in history. In 1968, Bob Gibson would post the lowest ERA in modern baseball with 1.12. The only starter who has come close is Dwight Gooden in 1985 with a 1.53 ERA. Only 6 of his 34 starts that year would see him give up more than 2 runs in a game, and he would never surrender more than 4 earned runs in any of the games he appeared in. After losing 4 games in a row from May 12th to May 28th to put his season record at 3-5, Bob Gibson would go on to win 12 games in a row, giving up just 1 home run and 6 total runs in that stretch. Opponents would hit 167 in this time to give him a .5 ERA. Each of these 12 games were complete games, with 8 of them being shutouts. It was 2 months of untouchable complete games, start after start, that goes down as one of the most impressive stretches in all of baseball. My grandpa would be lucky enough to see him play in person in St. Louis. And to hear what it was like to see Bob Gibson pitch with your own eyes during this exact year in the World Series, I'll let you listen to my grandpa.
Yeah, hi, I'm Terry Wardinsky, and my grandson Nathan Wardinsky asked that I tell a few stories about the St. Louis Cardinals. And I attended medical school in St. Louis starting in 1965, and I, of course, was a high school American Legion baseball player and had a lot of interest in the major leagues. I actually got drafted to Class D ball by the Cleveland Indians, but decided the odds of making it were so low that I went ahead and went to college and forewent that experience. But anyway, when my wife and I and our little daughter ended up in St. Louis, the second night I was there, I went to a Cardinal and Los Angeles Dodger baseball game at the old stadium on, I forget the name, actually, the avenue, Grand Avenue. And it was pretty exciting. It was Sandy Koufax. They ended up, I believe, beating the Cardinals, but that was the first major league game that I ever attended in my life. And thereafter, while in St. Louis for 4 years, I was able to get fairly familiar with the Cardinals, and of course the great team that they had in 1968 was my favorite. And I was able to actually attend the last game of the 1968 World Series that the Cardinals played against the Detroit Tigers. Of course, the Tiger team was a pretty loaded team as well, pitching-wise, with Denny McLain and Mickey Lolich, and the Cardinals, of course, Bob Gibson, one of my all-time favorite pitchers. And I was fortunate. My landlord was able to stay up all night and get tickets. Of course, they were bleacher seats, and we ended up out in the center field section of the Busch, the newer stadium by that time. And I remember the game very distinctly. Bob Gibson was doing a pretty good job. It was a close game, the 7th inning, and there was a long hit driven to center field, and Curt Flood, I think, ran in when he maybe should have ran out, and the ball went over his head, and Detroit ended up scoring and winning the World Series thereafter. But I distinctly remember the workhorse that Bob Gibson was, and the great picture during that time, and have always continued to follow the St. Louis Cardinals. The Cardinals at that time, the major of the western United States, and we were from Montana, but central United States and western United States were all Cardinal fans for the most part until the Dodgers and the Giants moved westward, and then several other teams that in the years later that integrated. But anyway, that was my experience with the St. Louis Cardinals and my observation of the great team that they had at that time. Thank you.
Well, that was awesome. That was really good.
Oh, I don't know if it was.
I thought it was real good. If you know anything about how Gibson would pitch, it's that he wouldn't hesitate to throw the ball right at the batter. Not that he was trying to hit them, but he didn't mind if they stood there while his fastball beamed them in the side. He would throw 304.2 innings that year, leading the league in ERA, obviously, strikeouts, FIP, whip, shutouts, and hits allowed per 9. This year featured perhaps one of the greatest year-long pitching duels ever that concluded in Game 7 of the World Series between Gibson and the AL Cy Young winner, Denny McLain. This alone deserves its own deep dive, and I may make a video about it in the future, but despite his dominant efforts all year long, Gibson would fall short in Game 7 to see the Tigers win over him and the Cardinals. He would beat out Pete Rose for the NL MVP, and the 1,161 batters he faced that year would hit just 184 against him. 1968 was the year of the pitcher, as batting average would hit an all-time low at an abysmal .237, and the MLB would lower the mound by 5 inches to promote a higher offensive environment. While many complain about the low batting averages today, 2023 would see them hit .248, at least 10 points higher than during Gibson's time. While Gibson did come up short in the World Series, it truly speaks to his greatness that he was still so dominant it forced MLB to make the game easier for batters going forward. Hey guys, if you liked the video, please like and comment. I appreciate it. Thanks, guys. The next pitcher perhaps picked up a few things from Bob Gibson, as he would also be on the 1968 Cardinals, but is far more remembered for the Phillies, as Steve Carlton led the Phils to 27 wins in his 41 games, while the team itself only won 59 total games in 1972. That means they went from an elite club that would win 66% of the games he started on the mound to a basement dweller that would only win 26% of the games with anyone else starting. The Cardinals and Phillies would settle on a 1-for-1 trade, swapping Carlton and Rick Wise, who would both get the same 1-year contract with their new teams for $65,000. Rick Wise had a better 1971 season, but Carlton had a better track record. It is rare seeing straight swaps with players at the same position, but both teams had different ways of valuing players, and both Carlton and Wise were probably upset with how their current teams were handling their money and expected the grass to be greener on the other teams. Rick Wise was no slouch, but after what Steve Carlton did in 1972, it was far from an even trade. I know wins don't mean much now, and I do agree it is dumb to measure someone by it, but the stark difference from when Carlton was and wasn't on the mound is just crazy. Carlton would post the second most WAR ever by a pitcher after 1930, behind only once again Dwight Gooden with 12.1 WAR, and the next best Philly, Don Money, would post just 1.9 that year. The Phillies would start the season rather decently, sporting a 13-7 record on May 7th before winning just 3 games in the next month and losing 22 more to put them at 16-29 on June 6th that year. In just his first year with the team, this would be quite the difference from his days with the Cardinals, as he would go to back-to-back World Series in St. Louis in 1967 and 68. Steve Carlton would start a crazy 41 games that year, with 30 of them being complete games and 8 of them being shutouts. His season was elite by both traditional and advanced metrics, as he would win the Triple Crown while also leading in FIP and posting career bests in WHIP, hits per 9, walks per 9, home runs per 9, and strikeout to walk ratio. The stars truly aligned for him to not only produce the best season in his career, but one of the greatest of all time. All that just to finish 5th in MVP voting. He had a very unorthodox way of maintaining shape that saw him practice martial arts, and according to the Baseball Hall of Fame, would twist his fists in the bottom of a 5-gallon bucket of rice to train his hand strength. He would even go on to break Bob Gibson's strikeout record of 3,117 in 1981 before adding 883 on top of it to end his career with exactly 4,000 strikeouts in the NL plus 136 in the AL. I think a lot of people's go-to selection for best pitching season ever, when considering the type of talent they had to go against, will always be Pedro Martinez in the year 2000. While being faced with some of the greatest offensive seasons ever, with a little help from a needle or two, Pedro would go to post the greatest ERA plus ever. For those unfamiliar, ERA plus simply takes into account the offensive environment the pitcher performed in. Think of it like ERA with context. A pitcher posting an ERA of 4 at Coors Field is much more impressive than one posting it at Petco or Oracle Park, due to it being easier to score runs at Coors Field. An ERA plus reflects this. An ERA plus of 100 is average, and any point above that indicates the pitcher being 1% better than average. So keep in mind an ERA plus of 120 is good, and the current modern day starting pitcher ERA leader Clayton Kershaw's all-time season high is 197, an outstanding mark that is hard to beat. Pedro would post an ERA plus of 291 that season. Being 191% above average means Pedro was providing the value of nearly 3 average big league starters in just one arm. In the middle of the steroid era, Pedro would go out and post a season that would be all-time in any offensive environment, but with the players that he had to pitch against, it's elevated to arguably the greatest pitching season ever. 2000 would be the highest OPS in the history of baseball, and so it really puts into perspective just how special having a 174 ERA in the middle of the most offensive year put together by the league is. Bob Gibson had an ERA of 112, with the league average being 298, and Pedro Martinez had a 174 ERA, while the league average was 476, and the American League average was 491. Martinez would post the lowest on-base percentage for batters faced in 100 years, with opponents reaching base just 21% of the time. Many talk about Tim Lincecum's small build on the mound, but Martinez broke the mold after the Dodgers deemed him too small to be a starter. In 2000, his ERA in games that he lost of 244 would still have led the league that year. Pedro would win the Cy Young Award unanimously, while the Red Sox would fail to make the postseason, despite having arguably the greatest pitching season ever every 5th game. Pedro would be the leader in shutouts, strikeouts, hits per 9, home runs per 9, strikeout to walk ratio, opponent's batting average, slugging, and on-base percentage. And ERA, with his ERA being less than half of second place's Roger Clemens' 370. The only other season during this era that could give Pedro's 2000 season a run for its money would be Pedro's 1999 season, which in some ways was even better, like striking out 13.2 batters per 9 and having a 139 FIP. When it came to stopping roided up batters, there was Pedro and then there was everyone else. After having to compare almost every other season to his in this video, I think it would make no sense not to see why Dwight Gooden's 1985 season was so special. You know your season is special when it forces its way into being mentioned into every other possible greatest season of all time. At just 20 years old, the Doc would throw one of the greatest seasons ever after posting the highest WAR since Walter Johnson and still the highest in the modern era. I think what made his season special was just how consistent he was, only giving up more than 3 runs a single time over 35 games started and 276.2 innings thrown. In fact, 33 of his 35 games would be quality starts that year, with 16 of them being complete games and 8 of them being shutouts. Even the game where he gave up 5 runs in 5 innings saw the Mets get the win while he got the no decision. He just didn't have any off days that season that saw him go out and run the table on a league of men after just turning 20 that prior November. He would come away with the pitching triple crown with a 1.53 ERA, 24 wins to 4 losses, and 268 strikeouts. His sole Cy Young season would account for 23% of his 16 career WAR, and Gooden would become the youngest Cy Young Award winner ever. I think this season will always be remembered as a glimpse into what could have been one of the greatest careers ever. With lower inning limits, more technology, scouting going into opposing teams, and more injuries than ever, it's unlikely we'll ever see a season on the level of the ones discussed today again, but I hope I'm wrong. There's plenty of talent today that has the ability to be as dominant as pitchers of the past, and all it would take is one amazing yet improbable season by any big league arm to shake up this list. We are seeing some of the most impressive movement come from guys who can ramp it up to 103, and hitters that are more willing to strike out in order to project more runs over the course of a full season. The ingredients are there to bake the perfect pitching season, and while counting stats may be out of reach simply from not getting enough innings to throw, I really hope we get to see someone push breaking the ERA record like Jacob deGrom did in 2021. But until then, we will always have these seasons to look back on.
I wanted to mention also that during the late 50s and early 60s, the broadcast team led by Dizzy Dean and Pee Wee Reese were really exceptional baseball announcers. For the game of the week, they were very descriptive, a lot of great humor, and a lot of very interesting baseball facts were expressed by those two very famous and great baseball, all-league baseball players themselves.
Did they announce for the Cardinals or which?
No, they were by CBS. It was the game of the week, and they had different teams, but we couldn't wait for the game of the week announced by those fellows and their baseball knowledge.